ate my food, used my towels, rearranged my kitchen, and on the 43rd day, my son-in-law told me I should think about finding somewhere else to stay. He said it casually, like he was suggesting I try a different brand of coffee. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and went to my room, which was no longer really my room, because they'd moved the reading chair out to make space for the baby's swing, even though the baby wasn't born yet and wouldn't be for another 4 months. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at the wall where my reading chair used to be. I need to go back a bit so you understand how I got there. My husband passed in February, 18 years together in that house on Elgin Street, the yellow one with the green shutters that he repainted every third spring because he said wood needed to breathe. We'd raised my daughter Sylvia there, then watched her grow up and move to Barrie for work. After he passed, people kept asking me if I was going to sell. My neighbor Hattie asked. My doctor asked. Even the woman at the pharmacy who fills my prescriptions asked, which I thought was a bit much. I wasn't going to sell. That house was mine. The mortgage had been paid off for 11 years. My name was on every piece of paper. And more than that, it was the place where I still felt him, in the garden he planted, in the dent on the back door from the time we came home from our anniversary dinner, and he dropped the keys 3 times before getting the lock open. I used to get annoyed at that dent. After he died, I wouldn't let anyone fill it. Sylvia called in April. She and her husband Owen had been renting a place in Barrie, but their landlord was selling the building and they needed somewhere temporary while they looked for a house to buy. She was also pregnant, just 10 weeks along, but already tired and a little scared. She asked if they could stay with me for a couple of months. I said yes without hesitating. Of course I did. She's my daughter. They arrived on a Thursday with a moving van, which I hadn't expected. I thought they'd come with suitcases. Owen shook my hand at the door and said, "This is going to be so good for all of us, Eleanor." That was the first thing he said to me. Not hello, not thank you, not how are you holding up. This is going to be so good for all of us. The first week was fine. I made dinner. We ate together. Sylvia helped me with the dishes, and we talked the way we used to before she moved away, about small things, a show she'd been watching, the garden, whether she thought the baby was a boy or a girl. Owen spent most evenings on his laptop, but I didn't mind that. People work. The second week, things started shifting. I came downstairs one morning and found that Owen had reorganized the pantry. Everything I'd kept on the left side, the cereal, the oats, the teas, had been moved to the top shelf where I can't reach without a step stool. In their place, he put his protein powders and his supplements and something in a black bag that turned out to be a juicer. I asked him about it and he said he needed the lower shelf because he makes smoothies every morning and it was just more efficient that way. I got the step stool out and didn't say anything. The week after that, Sylvia started cooking dinner. I want to be clear. I didn't mind her cooking. I was grateful, actually. She's a good cook, and she seemed to need it. Something to do with her hands while the pregnancy made her too tired for much else. But what happened was that she started cooking, and then Owen started commenting on what I cooked on the night she didn't. He said I used too much butter. He said red meat wasn't good for the baby, even though I was cooking for myself, not for the baby. He said the kitchen smelled like grease. One Tuesday, I made pork chops with apple and thyme, a recipe I've been making since 1987, since before Sylvia was born, and Owen looked at the pan on the stove and said, "Is that pork? She's not really supposed to have a lot of sodium right now." I looked at him, I looked at my pork chops, and then I put the lid on the pan and went to eat in the living room alone because I didn't trust myself to say the right thing. That was week 3. By week 5, there was a list on the refrigerator. It was printed on white paper and laminated, which meant he hadn't made it on a whim. He'd thought about it. He'd typed it out, printed it, and then taken the time to laminate it. The list said things like, all perishables must be labeled with name and date, shared surfaces to be wiped after each use, no strong-smelling foods between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m., noise levels to be kept low after 8:30 p.m. Sylvia needs her rest. I stood in front of that refrigerator for a long time. My name was not on any item in that refrigerator because everything in there was mine. I had bought everything in it. I had been buying food in that kitchen since before either of them was born. I took the list off the refrigerator and put it on the counter. Owen came in 20 minutes later, saw it on the counter, and put it back on the fridge without a word. I should have said something then. I know that now. I think part of me still believed it was temporary, that they'd find a house, that this was just a difficult patch that would resolve itself if I was patient enough. And part of me, the part I'm less comfortable admitting, was afraid, not of Owen, but of the silence that might come after. Sylvia was my only child. The idea of her not calling, not visiting, not bringing the baby to meet me in that kitchen where I'd fed her first solid food, that fear was bigger than the list on the refrigerator. So I stayed quiet. My daughter's old bedroom had become their room, which made sense. But then one weekend I came home from my Saturday errands to find that the armchair from my bedroom had been moved into theirs. Just moved. No conversation. My chair, the one I'd had for 14 years, the one I sat in every morning to read before getting up, gone from my room and sitting in the corner of theirs because, Sylvia explained, the baby would need a nursing chair and it was the right size. I said that was fine. My granddaughter, she's 12, my son's girl, she comes every other Saturday, noticed. She came in that afternoon, took one look at my room and said, "Grandma, where's your chair?" When I told her, she didn't say anything for a moment. Then she went to the kitchen and came back with a glass of cold water and a handful of the lemon drops I keep in the bowl on the side table. She pulled them out of her pocket like she'd been planning it. She sat on the edge of the bed with me and we shared the lemon drops, and she held my hand and she didn't say anything because she's 12 and she didn't know what to say, but she knew something was wrong. That mattered more to me than I can really explain. That was the thing that made me start thinking clearly again. Not the chair, not the list, not the pantry, but a 12-year-old quietly sitting with me on the edge of my own bed, offering me candy because she could see I was sad. Owen escalated 2 weeks after that. Sylvia had gone to bed early. Owen was in the living room when I came downstairs to make tea. I sat in the kitchen and he came in and stood in the doorway and said, almost conversationally, "Eleanor, have you given any thought to what your longer-term plan is, in terms of where you're going to be?" I thought I'd misheard him. He explained, still in that same even voice, that Sylvia's pregnancy was progressing and they were thinking about staying in the area longer than originally planned. That the house made sense for them. It was a good size, good school district, close to her doctor. That it might be less stressful for everyone if I thought about whether there was somewhere I could stay, with a friend maybe, or longer term in one of the retirement communities near Orangeville. He said the word communities like he'd practiced it. He was standing in my kitchen in my house at 9 o'clock at night, suggesting I move to a retirement community in Orangeville. I said, "I'd like you to leave this room." He looked surprised. He said, "Eleanor, I'm just trying to have an honest conversation." I said, "Good night, Owen." He listed my house on Airbnb while I was visited my house on Airbnb my sister in Kelowna. I looked at the crack in the linoleum near the back door. It had been there since 2009, and I'd been meaning to fix it for 15 years. I looked at the window above the sink with the lace curtain that my mother-in-law had given me that I'd washed so many times the pattern was almost gone. I looked at the dent on the back door, and I thought about my husband, and I thought about my daughter, and I thought about the chair in the other room, and the list on the refrigerator, and the step stool I'd been getting out every morning to reach my own cereal. And I thought, no, that's enough. I didn't sleep much that night, but I wasn't awake because I was crying or frightened. I was awake because I was thinking clearly for the first time in 6 weeks, and I had a lot to think through. In the morning, I called my solicitor. Her name is Barbara. She's been my lawyer for 22 years, and she answered on the second ring. I explained the situation briefly. She asked 2 or 3 questions. Then she said, "Eleanor, I'll prepare the formal notice. You'll have it by end of day." She did. The document was a formal notice requiring Owen and Sylvia to vacate the property within 60 days, which is the legal requirement in Ontario for a situation like this. Barbara had made it very clean and very official. It had my name at the top and the address of the property in language that left no room for interpretation. I put it on the kitchen table next to the coffee maker where they would see it in the morning. Then I went upstairs and went to sleep. Sylvia came to my room at 8 the next morning. She knocked, which she hadn't been doing lately. She was holding the document and her face was difficult to read. Not angry, exactly. Something more complicated than that. She said, "Mum?" I said, "Come in." I was already sitting up. I'd been awake for an hour. She sat on the end of the bed and we looked at each other. She said, "Did he say something to you?" I told her what Owen had said. I told her about the chair and the pantry and the list. I told her about the pork chops and the nights I'd eaten alone in the living room. I told her about sitting on the edge of this bed with her niece eating lemon drops because it was the only time in weeks I'd felt like someone saw me. Sylvia was quiet for a long time. There were tears, but she didn't make a fuss of them. Finally, she said, "I didn't know about Orangeville. I didn't know he said that." I believed her. I said, "This is still my house, Sylvia. It was mine when you were born, and it's mine now. I want you here. I have always wanted you here, but not like this." She nodded. She said, "I know." We sat there for a while longer. The morning light came through the curtains, the way it always does in that room, the way I've watched it do for 18 years. She and Owen moved out 5 weeks later, not 60 days, sooner. They rented a place in Innisfil while they kept looking. Owen didn't say much to me before they left. He carried boxes past me in the hallway and kept his eyes forward. I didn't try to fill the silence. Sylvia hugged me for a long time at the door. She said, "I'll call you." She has, every few days. She's due in November, and she's asked me if I'll be there, at the hospital, when the baby comes. I said yes. Of course I did. I moved my reading chair back to my bedroom that afternoon. Took me 20 minutes and I had to rest halfway, but I did it myself. I put it back in its spot by the window, where it's been for 14 years. I sat down in it and looked at the room, my room, the way it's supposed to look, and I stayed there for a long time without reading anything. I took the laminated list off the refrigerator and put it in the recycling. I did not fill the dent on the back door. Some things should stay. I've thought a lot about those 43 days. Not with bitterness, I'm past that now, but with the kind of honest clarity that only comes after you've had enough distance to see the whole picture. What happened in my house wasn't just about a pantry or a chair or a laminated list on a refrigerator. It was about what happens when someone slowly, quietly teaches you to doubt your own right to exist in your own life. Owen never raised his voice. He never threatened me directly. He moved things. He made comments. He put up a list, and I let it go each time because I told myself it was small. That's how it works. Not in one loud moment, but in 100 small ones, until one day you're getting out a step stool to reach your own cereal and you stop noticing how strange that is. I think about the version of me that didn't speak up, that kept nodding and going to her room, and I understand her. She was grieving. She was afraid of losing her daughter. She was tired in the way that people are tired when they've been doing everything alone for months, and someone offers to help, and it feels ungrateful to say the help isn't actually helping. That woman wasn't weak, she was human. But she was making a mistake that I think a lot of us make, confusing kindness with self-erasure. There's a kind of integrity that has nothing to do with being difficult or cold. It's the kind that says, I know what's mine, I know what's right, and I will not pretend otherwise just to keep the peace. That integrity was something I had to find my way back to. It was in me the whole time, the way it's in most people, just buried under the weight of trying to be accommodating, trying to be the kind of mother-in-law who doesn't make things harder than they have to be. And then there was my granddaughter, 12 years old, sitting on the edge of my bed with a handful of lemon drops because she could see what I couldn't fully see yet, that something was wrong. That kind of clear-eyed decency, the instinct to simply sit with someone and say with your presence, I see you, that's not something you learn from a book. It comes from paying attention, from caring enough to notice. She didn't have the words for what was happening, but she had the goodness to respond to it. I hope she always keeps that. What I had to find was the willingness to act on what I already knew. I knew it was my house. I had the deed. I had the mortgage receipts. I had 18 years of life lived inside those walls. What I was missing wasn't information. It was the courage to stop waiting for the situation to fix itself and to do the thing that needed doing. One phone call. That's all it took in the end. One call to Barbara, who'd known me for 22 years, who asked two questions and then said, "I'll have it ready by end of day." Because when you've done the right thing for yourself, the practical steps tend to follow. I don't know what Owen thought would happen. Maybe he thought I'd go quietly. Maybe he genuinely believed he was being reasonable. But there's a difference between being reasonable and being right, and I had stopped confusing the two. Sylvia calls every few days now. The baby's due in November. We don't talk about those 6 weeks very often, but when we do, we talk about them honestly, which is more than I'd hoped for. The chair is back by the window. The list is in the recycling. The dent on the back door is still there, and I'm leaving it. Some things you don't fix. Some things you just decide to keep.